The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. My name is Aubrey McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Alumni Professional Networks for the University of Maryland Alumni Association. We're excited you're able to join us for today's webinar, Your Business as a Band, Can You Get More Fans?, presented by Brian Bauer. This webinar is part of the Alumni Association's Professional Development webinar series, in which we hope to provide thought-provoking and valuable content that will help alumni like you achieve your personal and professional goals. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we will be taking questions throughout the duration of the webinar. Please feel free to submit any questions that you have using the question box that is located in your GoToWebinar control panel. A recording and slides from today's webinar will also be available and shared with you following today's session. A little bit about our speaker today. Brian is a 2006 graduate of the University of Maryland, graduating with a degree in psychology from the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. Today, he is a Nashville-based entertainment marketer, entrepreneur, and president of Bauer Entertainment Marketing. Bauer Entertainment Marketing has produced campaigns for clients including the Tortuga Music Festival, the X Games, Luke Bryan, NASCAR, Kid Rock, Kanye West, the Music City Bowl, and Jam Productions, among many more. Previously, Brian led his own New York City-based digital marketing consultancy and managed Guyrilla Marketing Group, an organization providing strategies and alliances for companies marketing to men. He created and implemented high-profile marketing summits that attracted speakers and attendees from Microsoft, the NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, Nike, J.Crew, ESPN, and ABC's Shark Tank. Brian is the manager and drummer for professional touring and recording bands, including Brian Scary and the Shredding Tears. He shared the stage with artists including Chris Stapleton, Cage the Elephant, and Donnie Harrison. And he signed a record deal with Elijah Wood's Simeon Records for an album that reached number 6 on iTunes and number 30 on the Billboard. Brian has been nominated to Nashville Business Journal's Top 40 Under 40, Nashville's Next A List, and the Nashville Chamber of Commerce Emerging Leader Award. And now we will get started. Brian, take it away.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Always a fun opportunity to reconnect with my alma mater here. So and appreciate the intro. My background. I'm a third generation drummer, son of a piano teacher. So totally born into music, and while attending University of Maryland, I, as mentioned, worked at several labels, RCA, Universal, worked at MTV, and I also had a radio show at school in the coveted 2 to 4 a.m. slot, and played gigs at Santa Fe and knocked boxes all around College Park. So. Definitely, had a great experience at Maryland, and after graduation, as mentioned, I continued to work in radio and record labels in New York. Ended up getting the opportunity to record music and tour professionally for several years, and while I was on the road to, we'll say, actually make money, I managed social media for marketing, social media marketing for like law firms and insurance brokerages, and really honed a lot of my marketing chops. And as the kind of full-time music career dissolved, I leveraged that experience to secure a role in Nashville at an entertainment marketing agency, and there I eventually became agency director. And then when that parent company decided to move the business to Raleigh, it became my opportunity to then create Bauer Entertainment Marketing. Yeah, that's my mug there, so you can kind of see what I look like. And as mentioned, Bauer Entertainment Marketing, we deliver more fans, sales, and profit. We've helped grow about 100 plus music, sports, and entertainment companies. For every dollar companies spend with us, they see an average of 16 in return. So we're very data driven and able to measure our activity from action through to revenue. We're a full service marketing agency that provides strategic consulting, also hands-on campaign management. We're industry leaders in removing barriers and capturing opportunities for growth through conversion rate optimization. So if you do want to learn more about us, you can go to BauerEM.com. So today's webinar, it's called Your Business is a Band. how can you get more fans? And so I'll be offering observations and advice for leaders of every kind of business by analyzing difficulties and successful growth strategies faced by professional musicians. And so specifically, we'll be exploring, why and how effective branding can attract fans for bands and businesses alike. So I'll be discussing, factors that constrain growth and why branding is one key solution. The importance of analyzing your business and setting attainable goals. Determining who you are telling your brand story to, right? So your target audience. Identifying who else is engaging with your audience. Solidifying your brand's values, qualities, and benefits. Communicating your brand identity. Developing a brand style guide. Maintaining your brand over the long term. And then remaining accountable for your brand success. So growing a band is extremely difficult. And even though your actual business is probably not a band, these same 4 factors are probably constraining your company's growth. So the product, music, is abundant and subject to commoditization. So due to game-changing technology like iTunes, Spotify, recorded music has become more accessible than ever before. It's in higher supply. It's also equally priced. And so I would like to maybe take a minute here with the poll and just kind of get people engaged a bit to learn what's your preferred way to purchase music. So we'll tabulate the poll later on in the webinar. I'll say many consider recorded music to be a commodity these days. When your product is considered interchangeable, it unfortunately loses its value. For the music industry, it's evolved where touring used to be, a way to promote album sales, and now it's pretty much the opposite, where records are sometimes considered almost marketing expenses in a way to promote tours and live shows. So next, the target market, right? So listeners, ticket buyers, they're elusive and they're finicky. The average concert goer only attends about 3 shows a year, plus the average ticket order is for roughly 3 tickets. And so the concert promoter and performers, they only get the contact info for the one person who bought the ticket and not the other 2 guests. So it's difficult to determine which consumers are engaging and which are the true decision makers. Moreover, what's a chart-topping hit today can be old news by tomorrow. So if you do get traction, question is, how can you avoid being a one-hit wonder? So the competitors, say other bands, right? So they're numerous, they're often aggressive. Americans streamed 403 billion songs in the first half of 2018. So certainly from a consumer's perspective, it can feel overwhelming for these fans to choose which artists deserve their time, their loyalty, their money. So how can you stand out from all the other bands playing a gig this Friday night, right? Plus consumer spend is finite and their choices go beyond just music for their entertainment. So that, TV, movies, books, etc. And so similarly, your buyers may prioritize other expenditures above what you're offering. So it's imperative that your business delivers more unique value and effective marketing so that they choose you. Lastly, the intermediaries, so venues, labels, booking agencies, they all have their own agendas, their expectations and priorities. So there's a saying in the music industry where, it's unfortunate, but saying is artists get paid last. And intermediaries are often kind of these unavoidable gatekeepers for artists. For instance, at the end of a club gig, when it's time to settle a show and get paid, the promoter will deduct for the sound engineer, security, food and drinks, etc. And that, then 25% of whatever you have left, that needs to be set aside for your manager, your booking agent. Again, artists get paid last. So many bands and businesses avoid or mitigate their dependency on middlemen by doing it themselves, DIY, or perhaps finding more direct routes. I'll say, recent example, Kanye West, love him or hate him, he recently announced that he no longer needs a manager. And I think we all agree that he's probably at a point where he no longer needs an intermediary to get meetings or develop his business in the way that he wants to. And so, one thing I'm also kind of just curious about. So I saw Kanye at Stamp Student Union when Through the Wire came out, and I would love to hear in the chat box if anybody else saw him, or maybe if not, maybe what the best show that you ever saw at University of Maryland was, and we'll read some of those off here in a little bit.
So I'll give about a minute here to allow any responses to come in. Again, as Brian said, you do have a chat box as well as a question box. Either are appropriate. I have access to reading both. But feel free to share if there's any cool concerts or entertainers or anything that you saw while you were a student on campus, or even as an alum and came back to campus. And we'll just give a minute here to collect any answers.
Awesome. So, overcoming challenges via branding and confronting them via branding. I think one key to one solution for those four items that I brought up is branding. And just to kind of define branding a little bit more, so a brand is the consumer's perception of the business, based on every observation and interaction they have with it. And so having a distinctive, memorable, and motivating brand can help in a variety of ways. So it can help add substance to your company. It can help differentiate. It can help attract, retain, and transcend. And I think that's true for artists, and it's true for almost every other kind of business. Nearly 2/3 of consumers prefer to buy products from companies they know, companies that they trust, and the companies that they identify with. And that consumer confidence, it can be achieved via branding. And so, using the music industry for context, I'd like to examine with you guys how effective branding can attract fans for bands and in turn your business. So, Aubrey, I don't know if we want to answer any questions or talk about the poll or any chats.
Yeah.
But we can certainly take a second here and do that.
Sure. So we had some people respond, just recalling some times that they had on campus. Somebody saw Dane Cook at Cole Fieldhouse. We had another individual see Living Color, and another one see G-Lub and Special Sauce at Art Attack. We also have somebody on the webinar who was a music major and then an architecture school major. So in their first part of their time here, they spent a lot of time playing music as opposed to watching musicians. So they didn't really get to take the opportunity to see any of the various concerts or shows on campus, but maybe they were more of a part of those things that were being attended to. And then in terms of the poll that we did a little bit earlier, I'll share those results with everybody now, just in terms of the preferred way that folks purchase music. Overwhelmingly, a lot of people, about 64% of you, prefer to stream it. And then another about 20% prefer to digital download, and only 7% go towards CDs and other. So a mix of different answers. Nobody has vinyl.
Bummer. Well, I'll say vinyl is one of the interesting mediums for music where it's been growing. And I will say a lot of that credit goes to Nashville's own Jack White. I think he's really kind of championed that. But CDs for sure. Cars don't even offer, or new cars don't even offer a way to play CDs anymore. So it's just it's that Bluetooth connection is the preferred method, and it doesn't surprise me that streaming is the most popular. That just certainly aligns with kind of the rest of the marketplace. So cool to see those responses from our listeners. Thanks guys. So analyzing your business and setting clear goals, I think, is very important. So creating, strengthening, and leveraging a brand to achieve growth, it's a multi-step process, and it starts with analysis and goal setting. And so that's or in other words, you've got to fully understand where your business is today, and commit to where you want it to be next month, next year, 5, 15, 20 years into the future. And so to do so, I think that you need to answer these questions. So what is your current sales revenue from customers? And what sales revenue would you like to have? What is the current net profit margin from a customer relationship? And then what net profit margin would you like to earn? What is the average duration of a current customer relationship? And then what duration would you like to have? So that churn question. And then what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that impact your plans for growth? I think it's also very important to be realistic. When assessing your business, it's crucial that you be honest and you set attainable goals. Kind of reminds me of a story that went recently viral about a band, and I'll say band in quotes, called Threaten. And so they seem to skip the analysis part altogether and tried to fake their way to achieving their goals. And so this band, Threaten, they created fake social media followers. They bought their own tickets to inflate numbers. They created a fake team, including a fake manager and a fake agent and a fake record label, in order to persuade venues to book them. And it worked. They did get booked, but they showed up for their European tour and played to rooms with like 3 fans in them when the clubs were told there would be 300. So again, you gotta be realistic. And I'll say an example maybe outside of entertainment is Sears. I think they ignored analysis and set unrealistic goals. Data clearly indicated the market shift towards online shopping, yet Sears kept on doing business as usual. They kept spending millions of dollars to drive in-store purchases, and until their company and brand virtually disappeared. It was kind of too late. So I think these are maybe extreme examples, perhaps, but it certainly emphasizes the importance of honesty and achieving a successful brand. It's a hard process, but ultimately, I think it can help you showcase your strengths, mitigate your weaknesses, identify opportunities, and transcend threats. So who are you telling your brand story to, right? So focusing solely on your business is not enough to capitalize on branding. I think you also need to conduct a thorough examination of your customers and your prospects. Getting inside their heads and hearts, that's the way to ensure that a brand differentiates, resonates, and motivates. And so, ask yourself these questions. So, if you're asking, somebody that purchased from you, what would a current customer and fan say about that experience? If asked why he or she declined to purchase from you, what would a recent non-buyer say? Next, who are your most profitable and loyal fans, right? So this is kind of classified as like a buyer persona. So what's the demographics, geographics, psychographics that kind of describe your typical fan? Who do you want to identify with your brand? Is there a difference between who you have as a fan and who you want as a fan? How do your fans make their purchase decisions? Next, what are their aspirations and frustrations? And what emotions do you want your target market to feel when considering whether to buy from you? So one client we had several years back was a new music festival and it was a country music festival, and they were absolutely dead set that their audience were kind of like post-college guys. And so the marketing material that they wanted us to create and implement was girls in cut-off jean shorts and talking about rolling in the hay and just kind of real still tongue-in-cheek but very on the nose. And it became very clear to us, certainly based off our experience working with other artists and festivals, that this just was not resonating. And so we asked them nicely to do a little bit of a timeout and go back to the data and really understanding the audience. And after digging in, sure enough, we found that the people that were engaging with them the most was actually middle-aged females. And so it was a complete shift and kind of miscalculation from what we had kind of originally started with. But after we determined who we were telling our story to, we were able to pivot, and sure enough, engagement went through the roof, as did ticket sales. Outside of entertainment, similarly, I would say that Kodak. So Kodak, essentially, they created the market for consumer photography, but I don't think that they really tapped into the trends and preferences of new consumers. And so, by failing to understand their audience, sales tanked, and I think their brand basically vanished. So identifying the competitive landscape. So just as an artist has to compete against other talented, motivated musicians in order to sell more tickets and records, the businesses, they need to consider the competition when building and leveraging their brand. So here are some really important questions I think that you should be asking yourself. Who else is your target audience engaging with and buying from? How are similar companies branding themselves? What is and is not working for them? And how can your brand neutralize their advantages and optimize your advantages? So at this point, having considered your current business, your customers, and your competitors, I think you're now ready to define and really craft your brand. So these are all tough questions, but ones that you must address in order to pin down the values, the qualities, and benefits behind your brand. So what does your business stand for? What is its purpose for existing beyond just generating a profit for you? And when kind of viewing this through the lens of bands, I would say that this is probably an easier question for artists to answer than it is for traditional businesses. They're a bit more driven than by their artistic expression than finances. But this next question, and I'll just read it. So, what unique value do you provide? What about your brand is most distinctive and not offered by anyone else? And I think that question is much harder for artists to answer than it may be for a typical business, because competition is greater and a little bit more difficult to wrap their arms around. Next, what makes your business extraordinary, right? So what would enable your brand to just amaze others? What's your company's Kiss makeup or Fish light show or Pink acrobatics? What image of your business do you want to convey to others? How do you want fans to view your band? 64% of consumers cite shared values as the primary reason why they have a relationship with a brand. And when I found that stat, it really made me think about, why do we buy the band T-shirt or put the bumper sticker on our car after seeing a show? It's we want that band to kind of represent who we are, right? And so thinking about that in terms of your business could be helpful. So next, you're going to want to consider how you're going to communicate with your brand to current and potential fans. You have to establish a clear, distinctive, and sustainable brand voice that can cut through the clutter, deliver more substance, remain memorable. In other words, what's, when you think of Snoop Dogg, that kind of the for shizzle, that, what's your company's Snoop Dogg, for shizzle? So to do that, you got to answer some questions here. So what and how do you communicate to fans or customers? How would you describe your brand's personality, style, attitude? What particular phrases, words, grammar do you use? I think that these answers should help you then capture probably 2 to 3 powerful sentences, what's commonly called an elevator pitch, your brand's personality, its essence, and value proposition. It should succinctly say who you are and what you provide and why fans should care enough to purchase from you and also repurchase. So why don't we take a minute here, and if there are any questions or comments, I know I've been kind of flying through this and would just love to be able to answer any questions that anybody has or needs clarification on as well.
So again, we do have a question box that's located in your control panel. For those of you that are joining through a laptop or through a desktop, anything like that, you should be able to see it. That is the best way to communicate, type out any questions that you have, any thoughts or comments so far. We'll take just a couple of minutes or a minute or so here to get those in before we continue.
Awesome. Yep. And I also don't want to get too jargony too. If there's any clarification on terms or anything like that I'm saying, like, by all means, don't hesitate to just ask for some clarity on that, because I don't want any of this to go over anybody's head. Or, if you feel on the flip side, this is, kind of stuff you already know, like, feel free to ask me some more in-depth questions and we can dig in a little bit further. Cool. So why don't we move to the next section here? And this is...
Well, Brian, I'm going to stop you, sorry, just for a minute. We did have a quick comment coming through saying that differentiation is very intimidating in the internet age. So there's so much competition, a lot of supply, and it just can get overwhelming for the brander as it is for the consumer. So not necessarily a question, but just a comment out there. Do you find that differentiation is even more so intimidating in this day where there's so much on the internet, and how do you kind of sift through that as a brander?
Totally. Yep. I think that's it's a great point where there's pros and cons to the internet, right? And where what once could just be a local brand. Now it's opened up where even a mom and pop is facing a Google search away from a provider all across the world. And so, being able to distinguish a company and a brand is certainly I can't think of another time where it's been more challenging. And it just reemphasizes how important a lot of these questions are. And this process where, it's crucial that you understand your audience and their needs. I'll relate this a little bit to a conversation I had just yesterday about the ticketing industry and how many ticketing companies there are out there because of the technology barrier has decreased significantly over the past 5, 6, 7 years, where certainly Ticketmaster is the big, gorilla in the room. But again, because it's so easy to sell a ticket online, there are so many more companies that they've differentiated their brands by determining that they're going to create a certain niche where it's who they serve. And so a lot of ticketing companies may find that, let's say, air shows or escapades or icecapades or zoos or whatever a particular audience customer segment is that's their thing. Because again, all of these platforms, they can technically sell a ticket, and ticketing is very commoditized. Because of that, they're finding their differentiation in who they serve. So that might be, an opportunity to, at least position yourself in a different way. If it's not necessarily based off of service or product, focusing on a particular audience.
Great, thank you. And we actually had another question that came through as well. So if you're in the infancy of growing a fan base, would you advise on targeting your desired audience or on broader targeting and then hone in your target audience based on engagement that comes back?
Yep, another great question. So, and so I would say it's a good, healthy mix, right? So because it's fresh and new, you're not necessarily going to have the luxury of data that a more a company that's been around for a while might have, and so there is a degree of just making the decision that this is who we want to target, and then kind of analyzing and using a little bit of a feedback loop. So based off of the content and the the delivery of your product and service, just listen and kind of gauge how how the marketplace is reacting. And so based off of that, then you can start refining and pivoting based off of what the data is telling you.
Great, thank you.
Cool, good question for sure. So and I'll say there's certainly type in more questions, and then we'll get to them as we go. So we talked about the competitive landscape, brand values, and so now focusing a little bit more on and how to communicate your brand, and now focusing on how you want to say or how you want to communicate your brand. Now it's more about formalizing the brand so that you can really achieve consistency. And so I think it's essential to have a comprehensive style guide to make your brand more than just a collection of thoughts in your own head, and give your brand life by documenting its tactical elements, right? And so these include the mission, brand values and voice, color palette, logo design and placement, typography and fonts, iconography, photography, and videography. And so with the style guide, it's easier to maintain your brand standards, both internally, but also externally, right? So very, with your partners, your vendors, much easier to share a document than have to have a conversation each and every time and back and forth about, what your brand is and should be. And so, relating it back to music, right? So bands with their record label right now, they can deliver that exact fluorescent pink album cover that they were hoping and dreaming of without all that back and forth. So what's next? The brand development process, it's never truly complete. So even after fans have discovered a brand, their impression of it continues to evolve, either positively or negatively. Going back to what I said about the kind of the definition of branding, where it's just these touch points. It's every touch point evolving and becoming kind of an overarching interpretation of that brand. It's very important to consider that ever growing. So branding, it's a means to an end as well, which would be more awareness, leads, and sales. And so you should consistently measure the effectiveness of your branding efforts, both quantitatively and qualitatively. For instance, has there been an increase in return customers to your store? What about an influx of conversation about your brand on social media? I think sales are also the tail end of customer interactions. So you can measure all aspects of the sales funnel, from how they're discovering your business to what is their consideration process to the steps required to buy. So again, just tracking sales, it's just not completely enough, right? And then also, I think it's important for first-time purchasers. A brand has to first consider winning them over, and there's a buyer risk that must be addressed. But for repeat purchasers, a brand must also account for prior experience and satisfaction. So a brand has to simultaneously invite and reward. So ultimately, it's up to you to be your brand's champion and strengthen it among your bandmates, partners, fans. So you've got to be vigilant over time to maintain the brand standards, which in turn grows familiarity, and then more recognition can drive more trust, which is a requirement for maximizing sales. And so I'll say on average, businesses that present a consistent brand story experience a 23% increase in revenue. So when your tour poster matches the stage design, which matches your website, etc., you're conveying a consistent and recognizable story to existing fans, which in turn attracts new fans. And I'll say, don't fall too deeply in love with your brand. I think it's vital to remain attentive and flexible, or you could be right there back playing shows in your mom's basement. So you guys have you've taken a little bit of a leap of faith here by thinking of your business as a band. Although there are certainly differences, I believe the analogy will still help you think about your company with a fresh and creative perspective. So thank you guys very much for joining me. Happy to answer any questions on this webinar, but also this is my contact information, so feel free to message me directly if you'd like, and happy to get back to you with answers.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, a recording and slides from today will also be going out to all of you. Those will be going out at the very latest by tomorrow, so you'll have that as well, along with Brian's contact information, in case you don't have the ability to write it down right now. But we do have a couple of questions right now that are coming in, so we'll get right to those. In terms of outreach, Brian, do you find that audio or video tends to be more effective?
I think, and thanks for the question. I think there's a lot of factors that would go into being able to answer it. I think that video, it's certainly championed by social media, Facebook in particular, and so investing in video is a trend that I think will pay off, but it just kind of depends on your business and your audience. So it's a little bit tough to say in general, but I'm a big fan of just testing and allowing the data to kind of dictate if something's working for you for your content. Pour more fuel on the fire and keep going down that path. If something you're finding you're not seeing those spikes in engagement and sales, pivot and do it quickly. But I think it's ultimately really important to just try different things in different mediums to see what may or may not resonate with your audience.
Great, thank you. We also have another question about storytelling. So how do you use storytelling in building your brand? Is it the story behind the brand that you tell, or do you have any thoughts about using stories in branding?
Great question. Yeah, I think, I look at marketing in general as just the mechanism of kind of telling stories. And so, it's, I think, very important to be authentic with your stories and again, consider who you're telling your story to before you craft it. Gotta, know the room, if you will. And stories need a beginning, middle, and end, and so and sometimes it's knowing that. Sometimes maybe withholding the end is a mechanism for getting listeners to take action, so that they can get the answer to how the story ends. And so, and I know I'm kind of talking in generalities, but ultimately, as you're crafting your brand, it's being honest, it's being authentic, and also just being consistent across the board. And so, where you're telling your story, needs to align with, from top to bottom, everybody who's telling it and everywhere it's being told, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. When it comes to social media branding, do you find that there is a better place to focus your advertising dollars when it comes to social media? Like there's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. Is there I guess, one size fits all for where it's most effective, or is it more based on different demographics prefer different types of social media?
Well, certainly different demographics prefer different platforms, right? So Instagram, that's skewing younger than, let's say, Facebook. I think that sorry, the question, help me, what was the first part of the question again? Just remind me.
Yeah, just about where should you focus advertising dollars for social media branding, or is it more based on demographics?
Yeah. I mean, it certainly is. I think, there's a lot of really interesting ad units and different types of products too with social media. So video ads I've seen perform very well for some, and for others it's just been okay. But there's lead capture ads as well that perform well for some and not so great for others. I will say that Twitter is probably not my favorite place to do social advertising. I think it eats up a lot of budget too quickly. So I tend to lean more towards Facebook and Instagram. And if I do go down the path of doing Twitter advertising, I try to surround it around like a hashtag with a particular event where I'm confident that there will be people attending and they'll be attentive, but at least it narrows it down a little bit so that it's just not as global, and again, just your budget vanishes. But other things to consider with Facebook and Instagram ads, there's some great software out there that you can use to kind of serve ads dynamically, so that you're maximizing your clicks. So it'll serve variations of your copy and images, and whichever variations are getting the most clicks, it will continue to serve those first. So I know like Ad Espresso is one platform that we've used that's been beneficial for that. So hopefully that helps answer your question and gives you a little bit extra too.
Definitely, thank you. A question specific to the music business that you're in: has or how do you expect, I guess, fan patronage to factor into the music business?
Yeah, so Patreon, Kickstarter, all these platforms are massive, and there's a whole cottage industry that's kind of popped up, certainly in the marketing world, where artists and managers will hire these businesses to help them with their kind of fan patron platforms and fundraising. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where the intermediaries are a big challenge. Well, now that Kickstarter and these types of fundraising platforms are so commonplace, that's definitely a way to cut out kind of what the record label was almost like the only path for creating music in recording music. And so I that's definitely a big way for artists to create now and fundraise their creations, and I think it's just going to keep on growing. There's so many different interesting ways now beyond just the record label to make an album and even a tour happen.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll give it just another minute here to get any last minute questions into Brian. Again, feel free to contact Brian directly if you have any follow-up questions or want to connect with him as well. Brian, you have a LinkedIn, correct?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
Perfect. So I'll also send that out in the follow-up email in case you'd like to link in with him and connect. We do have a question here about Blog Talk Radio. Is it a good resource or a waste of time?
So if I'm understanding correctly, is blogging or like podcasting, I guess, is I'm going to assume that that's sort of the question. But I would say just kind of earlier, the medium, it depends on where your audience is currently engaging, right? So I think it's really important to kind of go to where your target audience is spending their time already. And the only way to truly find out if it's a waste of time would be to give it a shot and see what the response is. I think that from a blogging perspective, there are huge SEO benefits to blogging, where you're also giving your audience a reason to continue visiting your website. But that's also content that Google can index and help bring in more organic traffic. That's content that your sales team can use for outreach, so that it's not all just, hey, do you want to buy? Hey, do you want to buy? There's actually some compelling, valuable content that they can provide to engage and create that conversation. So there's a lot of different value there, I think, when it comes to content marketing, and just in terms of the medium that it gets distributed in, I wouldn't get too hung up on that. I think it's goes back to kind of the audience question.
Perfect. Thank you. Maybe more of a side question, not related to the topic today. Do you remember your residence hall when you were in I guess freshman year, 2002?
I was in Cumberland,
Ah.
and then I lived after that in the Commons. I think it was Commons 5.
Yeah, we have a attendee on the webinar today who was also Cumberland 2002. So I don't know if you know Garrett, but Garrett gave a shout out there to you. Not
only do I know Garrett and I used to play some great music together all across College Park.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Garrett, it's great to have you on this webinar as well. And I think we wrapped up all of our questions today. So I just wanted to give a huge thank you, Brian, to you for all of your time and sharing your information with everybody here. Again, if you want to talk to Brian directly, more one-on-one, and discuss your own personal situation, please feel free. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I want you to have a wonderful holiday, wonderful day today, and go Terps.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.